There is a world of Yukai, in which everyone proves their existence only with the help of their strength. Yokai are mythical creatures in Asian mythology, and can be called demons. For a man, everything in such a world seemed very simple. It had been like that since a very long time. Because since birth, he was the greatest and strongest among other Yukai. He was the one who proclaimed himself the mountain lord of the human kingdom based on his strength. In the next battle, the enemy turned out to be stronger than the man and was able to lay him down on his shoulder blades. He stepped on the so-called ruler's chest while he lay on the ground and spat blood. He boasted when he challenged his opponent to a fight, saying that he would not back down. But now when they fight, he becomes a coward and runs away. The guy was a nine-tailed fox, and he repeated for the third time that you shouldn't bare your fangs in front of others like him. It was as if the man didn't have the pride of a tiger because he ignored his warning. The fox doubted that there was a reason why he should have spared his opponent. Everything that happened made the man furious, and calling the enemy a bastard fox, he turned into a huge tiger. The fox believed that there was nothing scary about this, because when you increase your body, it simply becomes more meat. Therefore, without flinching in front of the huge beast, the fox began to attack him, to which he did not even have time to respond. He had nothing to fear, because the guy was the strongest fox, named Tynho, and such a fight was nothing. He was also the head of the fox Yukai and the king of the kingdom of these demons, but this happened, one might say, by accident. Tynho actually had no intention of becoming king, but this happened after one battle. He was proclaimed ruler after he defeated the strong bastard. It was a dragon that had been chasing fox Yukai for 500 years and was annoying by flying above its head. In his free time, he rested and slept on his so-called throne, but he was disturbed. After becoming king, representatives of different nations began to constantly bother him. One day an old man came to him, waking up the guy and raising the logical question of who he was. He turned out to be a Dharma follower, a monk from the human realm, and he was clearly angry about something. The old man began to show the fox, calling him a scumbag, because the guy didn't even know how much harm the Yukai had caused to humanity. While Tynho was listening to all this, another fox came up from behind and told a little about the man who had come to them. This humble monk defeated 12 Yukai with his strange gestures, which he called martial arts. At that time, there was no border between their kingdoms, so Yukai often visited people and caused problems. Tynho looked tired. His head was pounding just from the problems in the Yukai kingdom. He didn't care whether the monk caught the Yukai causing trouble, whether he killed him or spared him. Therefore, the fox wished the modest old man all the best and left, which caused indignation among the man. He considered the king an irresponsible bastard, and he came to their kingdom precisely for a different answer. Tynho didn't think it was irresponsible, it was just that the problem was minor and trivial, so he had no interest in it. The monk was overcome with rage and decided to do exactly as the fox told him, so he took a fighting stance. The fox, without turning his head towards the old man, looked at him, realizing that he would now begin to attack. In these couple of seconds, Tynho managed to assess the old man's physical strength and speed and realized that they were not inferior to Yukai. The guy saw martial arts for the first time, but they didn't particularly impress him. He continued to look at the man with sleepy eyes. At this time, the monk tried his best to somehow harm the king and hit every place he could. He may be strong in the human world, but for this fox, he is nothing more than an ant playing on his leg. Tynho was tired of wasting time on him, and he simply hit him in the chest at the time of the next attack. All the old man had time to do was be surprised at how easily the guy reached the point of impact, bypassing all his attacks, without even straining. After this blow, the monk flew very far away. The Yukai clearly did not calculate the strength of his attack. He didn't know it would be so difficult to hit someone without killing him, but the guy didn't want him dead. The old man hit a tree and fell under it, losing consciousness. The second fox asked the king if it was worth ending him. But Tynho didn't see the point in killing the insect that was crawling under his feet, and having finished his job, he calmly went back. Yukai king ended up saving his life and sending him back to the human kingdom. But it seems this foolish monk has gone mad, because he came to the king again, just 15 days later. He hoped that today they would finish what they started with the vile Yukai. He even took with him a comrade named Jan Sambon. They decided that they could hit the guy with yin and yang energy, but they failed again. As Tynho studied their martial arts, only one thought came to his mind. If he spares them and sends them back, they will return again with more people. But this was not supposed to happen, so he had no choice but to kill them. Using his tails, he grabbed their necks and began to squeeze, thereby suffocating them. In the end, he simply made sure that he was no longer disturbed. The old men needed to retreat, taking into account the strength of the enemy. After the fox finished with the men, he simply snorted in their direction and went on to rest. But unexpectedly, behind him he heard the voice of a girl who was trying to shout to her brother. Yunho turned in surprise towards the men and saw his sister bending over the monk. The fox always considered himself a cold-blooded Yukai, but for some reason, this picture awakened unusual feelings in him. He looked at them with wide eyes, which was unusual for him, because even in battle he was as relaxed as possible. Seeing his little sister's tears like chicken droppings made him feel really bad for some reason. The girl buried these old men, placing a pillar on their graves, and continued to sit next to them. A week has already passed since their death, and she still hasn't moved from her place and hasn't even drunk water. Yunho gave the second fox a task to find out why she did not return to the human world while he himself was just watching her. He carried out the king's instructions. Judging by what he heard from the rats, her life completely depended on her brother. But this monk had many enemies during his life, so the fox immediately realized that she would die if she returned to her world. The fox believed that it would also be difficult for her to survive in the Yukai world if she stayed in it. But the king believed that at this rate, she would die of starvation before the Yukai got to her. Yunho took pity on the girl and brought her familiar, human food. She needs to eat well and live happily so that her older brother's soul can rest in peace. It was clear from the girl's lips that she was dehydrated. Her bags under her eyes betrayed her fatigue and hunger. If she finds it difficult to live wherever she goes, then there is nothing wrong with the idea of keeping her by the king's side for the rest of her life. Luckily, she seemed to understand his intentions and circumstances, perhaps because she had no other choice. Maybe that's why she accepted his offer to live in the world of Yukai without hesitation. Day by day she lived and quickly adapted among the cruel Yukai and calmly rode foxes. She looked happy and calm, especially if you remember how she was after her brother's death. Yukai King Yunho helplessly fell in love with her lovely face, her serenity and simplicity. Even from afar, looking at her, he felt a peace that he had never experienced in his entire long life. But one day, his calm was violated. He was replaced by rage. He saw something that he did not want and did not expect. His beloved was hanged on a stake, beaten and pierced with many spears. His subordinate, the gray fox, felt guilty for what happened. He could not protect her. He believed that he should have been aware of those scoundrels who came to pay tribute to the king. He regretted that his carelessness had brought misfortune to the young lady who was so dear to Yunho. The fox, listening to his assistant, stood silently over the corpse of his beloved with bitterness in his eyes. The last time the fox looked at the girl, he loved her very much and wanted to avenge her death. He found the rat his assistant was talking about. He shouted that he was only following orders and did not take part in it. But Yunho didn't listen to him and dealt with him mercilessly, because this bastard knew everything and did nothing. Then the king found a wolf, who, like the previous one, made excuses that he had good intentions. Someone told him that he knew her brother, but the guy didn't listen to this bastard and dealt with him. This scoundrel was unintentionally involved in the death of the girl, after which Yunho went to the next culprit. It was a huge boar who thought it was wrong for the bastard fox to protect a human girl. He tried to humiliate the fox, not understanding why someone like him was made the king of the Yukai, but he did not listen to him. He was some kind of brave and fearless freak, but the guy dealt with him in one blow, like with everyone else who was involved. Anyone who was involved in her death, even those close to him, could not escape his wrath. Their blood spread throughout the Yukai kingdom without having time to dry for a moment. King Yunho mistakenly believed that he would feel better if he killed them all. But his heart is still full of indignation and continues to beat furiously. He is just tired. He is sick of such a life. While the guy was assessing the situation and thinking about his life, something flashed in the pool of blood. First, a small glow appeared, which surprised the fox by its unexpectedness. A lotus began to grow and bloom from a large pool of blood. The guy guessed what it meant. A voice was heard saying that it was a childish prank that only heavenly creatures were capable of. He turned to the king, asking whether he was the immortal Lu Dongbin or Neza. But if he came to disturb Yunho, then it was already too late, as he could see, and the guy no longer wanted to see bloodshed. Therefore, he asked the lotus to hide out of sight. Anyway, nothing could be fixed, and it certainly wouldn't get any worse. Suddenly a very bright light began to shine from the lotus. The fox even squinted and tried to cover the light with his hands. This something began to lift him high into the sky. Yunho definitely did not expect this. At that moment, when the king fell into despair and lost the will to live, taking pity on him, this still came to him. It was a creature that helps all living things in this world not to go astray. Usually, he was called Tathagata, the material embodiment of the Buddha Absolute in any of the worlds. A creature several times larger than the guy suggested that Yunho give up his yokai identity and become human. Lism looked at the deity angrily, considering his proposal very strange. His first thought was that he was talking nonsense, but the fox still thought about it. After which, he realized that he could avoid the boring life of a yokai, and did not find a single reason for refusal. Yunho still thought about committing suicide. Perhaps living as a human would be even better. Turning to the great Tathagata, the desperate fox tried to turn him into a human. But everything was not so simple. It was not for nothing. The king of Yukai had to fulfill one condition. To do this, for 1,000 years, he must atone for his sins and do good deeds. Of course, Yunho didn't like it. He didn't want to deal with this nonsense for so much time. But despite his dissatisfaction, he still accepted his conditions. He still had nothing to lose. The guy thought that for an immortal Yukai this time is nothing at all, because life is, therefore, eternal. After their agreement was fulfilled, a year has already passed. All this time he has been doing good deeds. But after this time, it became clear that it was not as simple as he thought. 1,000 years began to seem like a very long time. He decided to count the years. But the thought of giving up crossed his mind many times. He didn't know if it was okay for him to exchange 1,000-year life of a yokai for a human life that didn't even reach 100. The years flew by. He continued to count them with stones and fulfill the terms of the agreement. Thinking of their agreement with the Tathagata as a matter of pride, fortunately the fox could bear all the difficulties and thoughts that came to mind. Finally, this 1,000 years passed, and something appeared to him again, praising him for the many good deeds that he had managed to do. First of all, his efforts to prevent yokai attacks on humans, his most valuable merit, benefited all of humanity. Yunho thanked the highest for the praise, and now he had to live a human life. Therefore, he needed to give away what he would not need as a person. The Tathagata extended his huge hand to the fox to take away his unnecessary thing. The guy, without hesitation, realized that he would not need it in human life and that he could calmly give it away. With the help of several movements, starting from the stomach, through the chest and throat, he pulled out a blue ball. It was a fox bead, his source of power, which he had been perfecting for 1,000 years. He felt sorry that he had to give her away, because he had been one with her for so many years. Which led Tathagata to a completely logical question, whether the guy would later regret his decision. But he doesn't seem like the type to regret something like that. So they set about making the transition. Amitabha is one of the Mahayana Buddhas, the great vehicle of the Buddhist path, by walking along which Buddhists strive to achieve awakening for the benefit of all living beings. Life constantly weighed on the fox, but now, having thrown it away, he felt lightness and happiness. With the help of a lotus petal, his soul flew a long distance and was brought to his body. It was the body of a young man from a rich family. The petal touched his forehead so that the soul would move. So, with the help of the Tathagata, he became a man and will live like other people. His eyes opened slightly. Yunho's story was just beginning. This was his second chance. The woman who was caring for the young man, going to his room, reasoned out loud. She thought about this guy's life, because the young master had barely reached puberty. But despite his youth, he has already tried a bunch of drugs and expensive procedures. But, unfortunately, none of this brought any results. The woman thought that heaven had turned away from them. But upon arrival in his room, a surprise awaited her. The guy was sitting on the bed, which stunned the woman. In surprise, she fell and dropped the breakfast plate that was intended for the young master. When Yunho's father found out that their son had woken up, he couldn't believe his ears and was very surprised. The nanny was so surprised that she turned pale and could not speak normally. But she ordered the messenger to urgently inform her parents about this. The man was overjoyed to the point of tears, and throwing the scroll he was studying into his subject's face, he ran to his son. At this time, Yunho walked with difficulty to the side where the woman's scream was coming from. On the way to this place, he saw a mirror that he could not pass by. Yunho was unpleasantly surprised. This was not what he expected to see when he decided to become human. He thought that he would become a child or an infant in order to live a full human life. He was very upset, but soon pictures and moments began to appear in his head. At first he did not understand what it was, but after a few seconds he realized that these were the memories of the owner of the body. This guy was the eldest son of the lord of a huge trading alliance called the Supreme Coalition. His name was Tynho. The former fox was surprised that they had the same names as this guy. He was weak physically and mentally. So a year ago, when his mother died, he was so shocked that he stopped eating and drinking. After the incident, he developed a chronic illness and eventually apparently died. Tynho was upset that he, the former king of the Yukai world, was placed in the body of a cowardly weakling who had lived a worthless life. He believed that the Tathagata had deceived him, or something like that, or at least acted dishonestly towards him. If he wanted to die, then he had to go and die, the guy thought, and did not understand what he wanted to achieve by exhausting his body like that. But in this situation, the guy could only blame himself. He needed to foresee this and put forward conditions for him that would exclude such situations. But then he remembered that the Tathagata had asked in advance whether he would regret it later. The guy tried to calm himself down, because now he is the owner of this body and he controls it. In theory, he can strengthen it without any problems, using, for example, natural energy. The great thing about natural energy is that it can turn a weakling into a warrior, and make a warrior even stronger. First he needed to eat. He decided to check the drawers in the room he woke up in for food. While he was rummaging through one of them, the parents of the owner of the body came running and saw their son standing on his feet. His father rushed to the guy, glad that this brat was standing firmly on his own 2 feet. He immediately began to feel the poor fellow, and asked how he was feeling, and if anything hurt him. A memory surfaced in his head where his father told him to move forward, even if it seems that it is too late. Involuntarily the guy called him father, which made the man very happy, because his son recognized him. Just in case, he introduced himself as the lord of this place. His name is Hajin Yu, who is also the father of this guy. The man immediately ordered the nanny to bring them something to eat, and she immediately ran there. They sat him down at the table and brought him a plate of hot food, and his father told him to take his time and eat slowly. Tynho looked at the plate with disgust. Being a Yukai, I tried it a few times out of curiosity. True, its taste was disgustingly bitter, causing wild rejection, so he did not want to eat it. But since he finally became a man, he must get used to this, and he decided to try at least a spoonful. Having tasted it a little, he was shocked. His father even thought that he felt bad again, and the guy asked what kind of dish it was. It was oatmeal cooked over low heat with finely chopped vegetables and meat. The nanny knew that the guy might not like the dish because there was almost no seasoning in it. But if he eats salty or fatty foods on an empty stomach, he may become ill. Tynho didn't even listen to the end. It turned out that he really liked the oatmeal and interrupted her with a cry of delight. He quickly stuffed the entire plate into himself and asked for more. His father was surprised by such an appetite. The guy didn't know that human food could be so tasty. It wasn't such a bad start. The Lord raised a glass to such a happy day, because his son finally woke up. Therefore, he wanted to share this toast with everyone who lives on this earth with him. The entire people rejoiced at this miracle, gave glory to the Lord of the Coalition, and joyfully raised glasses for him. A girl stood in the gazebo and read a book. It seemed to her that the city was very noisy, to which the second girl told her about what had happened. It turned out to be the sister of the owner of the body, who was also very happy to hear this news, but she was so surprised that she dropped her book. The guy did not lose hope and exercised to make his body stronger. 10 days have already passed, but the young master became strange after waking up, as if something had possessed him. According to the servants, with the exception of meals with the Lord, he always runs like this before sitting on the bench and immersing himself in thought. Perhaps he was thinking about something very important, his father suggested, but that was unlikely. Others can memorize 1,000 classical characters in just a month, but it took him more than a year. It was obvious that he was not doing this because he had some important goal. Although outwardly everyone seems silent, they share a similar thought in their souls. The Vice Lord immediately understood what people were thinking. Many thought that Tynho had become an idiot. There are some things you shouldn't say behind your back, but at least you should watch your mouth when discussing who pays them. His subjects agreed with him, after which he decided to visit Tynho on the street. He was still running, and after the next lap he sat down and extended his hand to the sky, Now everything became clear to him. Even after 2 weeks of absorbing natural energy, he was unable to gather almost a single drop into this damn body. He decided that the problem was that the energy flow was contaminated by human waste. It was about the pollution inside the human body. It seemed like he was doing useless crap. The guy wanted to leave the territory, but he was not allowed out, because the Lord ordered him not to be allowed outside the yard until he was cured. No matter how much he convinces the guards that he is fine, they still cannot disobey the order. Yunho was very upset and even a little angry, because if he were a Yukai, they would already be dead. But now he can't do anything about it. However, there is still a weak flow. He has no choice but to concentrate harder on it. So for now he just sat and thought. Suddenly someone disturbed his calm and he had to open his eyes slightly to find out who it was. It was the sister of the owner of the body, who was interested in what he was doing, which the girl really scared him about. She burst into tears and explained that her father did not want to tell her what happened because he was afraid that he would disturb him. The girl hoped that he would understand. Because she loved him so much, she considered everyone bad and did not understand how they could do this to her. There was information about her in his memories. It was Ha Somi, Ha Yunho's younger sister, who loves him very much. When he woke up, she burst into his arms and cried. Since then the girl always came to visit her brother in her free time. Also, she was one of the reasons preventing him from absorbing energy at the moment. But she didn't know this and invited her brother to eat cookies together, which the servant had brought from the market. The guy tried it, but was still outraged, thinking that she wanted to earn forgiveness by bringing him this. Yunho really liked these sweets, and he began to take them one by one, eating them with great appetite. Somi noticed that her brother had really changed. Before he didn't like sweets, and said that they were too sugary. He warned the girl that from now on, she would learn a lot of new things about her brother. After all, he only looked like her older brother on the outside, but she immediately made it clear that she loved him regardless of his habits. For her, the main thing was that he didn't get so sick again, and everything else was nothing. In the evening, Yunho sat at a table on which there were a lot of different dishes. The guy was very happy. His mouth was already watering. Today again a magnificent dinner combining land, sea and air. If the brutal Yukai saw such a table, they would burst into tears of bloody tears. But now Yunho can't do anything, because he's a human. He addressed the prepared animals, promising that today he would eat them all, remembering their sacrifices. Both Yunho and Somi came early for dinner. A little later the father came up, but the girl hurried him. The father sat down calmly, and was just about to make some kind of speech when he saw his son, who was stuffing the whole fish into his mouth. Eating like a human is a special pleasure, because during his time as a Yukai, he could not eat food for tens of thousands of years. He didn't care about the others. Yunho wanted to eat more. Even when his sister called him, he continued to put ribs in his mouth. After the meal, the father noticed that his son, in recent days, had become much stronger. He still had a long way to go, but this was enough for a start. But his father wanted to talk to Yunho about his studies. Maybe it was his father's greed, but he didn't like that he fell behind this year. He was chained and could not study, but now he could very well return to the academy. On the other hand, the father wanted the guy to live the way he himself wanted. Of course, he didn't tell him to go there right now, but when it gets better. Yunho clarified whether the academy was located outside the main courtyard, which surprised his father. After a positive answer, the guy smiled slyly, because he was just trying to get out of there. Therefore, almost without hesitation, Yunho agreed to go to the academy tomorrow. The father was happy, as expected from his son. His heart, understanding his father's will, remained the same. In fact, the guy was wondering about an excuse to go outside, but in the end everything worked out by itself. He took a mug of hot tea and began to drink it as if it were cold water. The father was afraid for the guy, and at that time he spat out boiling water. The fundamental principles of Confucius philosophy are love for one's neighbor, humanism, and noble thinking. The concept of Mencius said that man is initially characterized by philanthropy, a sense of duty, decency, and wisdom. The contribution of Confucius and Mencius is enormous, but during their lives they discover these postulates for themselves. Yunho believed that it was possible to learn what was taught at the academy anyway. Rich families paid poor teachers to teach their children. This was his understanding of the academy from the memories of the owner of the body. But that was not important. After all, the academy is just an excuse to go out into the outside world. When the guy left the courtyard, he took a deep breath, This was what he was waiting for. It seemed to him that with every breath, natural energy accumulated in his body at incredible speed. The guy felt how his previously heavy body became lighter and gained more strength. He exhaled with all his might, ran and jumped high, tearing leaves from the tree. After landing, he was very happy. His theory worked. The natural energy was simply incredible. The Vice Lord was pleasantly surprised that the young master had already gone to the academy, even though he had woken up relatively recently. The father was also happy that his son went to study, although he had only recently gone after an illness. The Lord made it clear to his deputy that he, too, still found it difficult to believe it. The Vice Lord noted that it is not uncommon for people to return to their former life in the face of death. Considering the young master's abilities, he was confident that the boy would become a great man and succeed as a lord. The father also wanted this. He was wondering if Tynho could continue his work. He is his beloved son, but now his intuition tells him that he is not suitable for the role of heir. But the Vice Lord thought that it was too early to make a decision, so he needed to wait a little longer. One of the subjects notified the men that the young master had returned from the academy. The father was very surprised, because his son came in the middle of the day, and even in this form. It turned out that he did not bring very good news. He was kicked out of the academy on the very first day. The Lord immediately went to deal with the teachers at the academy, and found out that Tynho got into a fight. It could hardly be called a fight, because the young master alone beat up several students. The father grinned and did not believe it, because he had only recently gained the strength to walk and run. The teacher was surprised. He was actually going to ask if Tynho had studied martial arts, because during the fight he was very fast. The father asked the guy if the teacher was lying and received a positive answer. Those guys surrounded him and began to mock him. As soon as he entered the academy, they thought that after his illness he would return as an idiot. But he endured, did nothing until they crossed the line and began to insult his father and late mother. And this is not the first time. They have been mocking the owner of the body for a long time. Tynho almost let it slip that it was not him. The father asked his son several times if he was sure of what he was saying, because the teacher knew everything. But Tynho wonders why the teacher ignored all their actions but only reacted when he beat them. The teacher had nothing to answer to this, but the father also had this question, and he looked at him in bewilderment. He was clearly upset. It seemed that he knew about everything, but could not do anything about it, and on the contrary, this made his father laugh. The teacher must have thought that expelling all the bullies would reduce the institution's income. He apparently made a decision that would do the least harm. His father seemed to understand his action, but did not approve. But this did not change the situation. The guy was still expelled, and this was the only academy in the area. Tynho apologized to the men, and said that he no longer needed the academy, after which he turned around and with a sly smile walked in the other direction from them. The Vice Lord asked the Lord what he thought about this as he stood there, eyes wide open in surprise. The deputy was in favor of the boy, because he had a reason to fight, and he defeated 7 alone. When he approached the gate, the guards no longer stopped him. Now he goes out and comes in whenever he wants. He did just that in the morning anyway. And now he went to the rocky area to gain energy. After he sat for a while, he exploded and ran towards the rock, running up it and landing on the top of his head. His legs no longer tremble and his breathing is no longer labored. Little by little, natural energy flows into his body and fills him with chi. He stood on the mountain and looked at the city, which was visible from it. He finally took the first step. Tynho and his father stood in the gazebo, and the man asked his son what is most important for a person. The guy thought it was money. Every evening he understood its importance more and more. His insight was similar to his father's, but he wondered what was second most important to the guy. Tynho believed that this was the strength needed in order to keep this very money. The man considered this answer to be quite good. Saving money is very good and necessary. But still, a more reasonable option is the strength to protect yourself, and not material values. After buying some things, a guy may lose his entire fortune, but he can always start again if he is okay. Tynho looked thoughtfully and a little annoyed at his father. He had nothing to answer. And then it dawned on the guy what he was hinting at. The guy apparently wanted him to study martial arts. He was right. My father asked if there were any problems. Maybe he wasn't happy with it. The guy remembered where it all began. 1,000 years ago, martial arts were invented by monks. Now it will be fun to learn the same fighting technique that he once defeated. But it could be fun. Therefore, Tynho was completely against it and agreed without any problems. he wanted to start training immediately. The father was very happy that his son supported his idea and decided to start by studying dantian. Dantians are the conditioning chi centers in the lower abdomen, heart area and head, important for meditative and physical techniques. Martial arts use chi energy, and the place where it is stored is called dantian. Therefore, to master martial arts, it is very important to create a dantian. She reminded the guy of something. It was described as being very similar to the fox bead, the source of his power when he was a Yukai. Remembering this, he asked a question about whether it is possible to remove the dantian from the body whenever you want, to which the Vice Lord replied without hesitation that it could not be pulled out of his body after creation. The young master understood how it was slightly different from the fox bead, but was still ready to begin. The Vice Lord and the Lord himself began to train him. First he had to sit down and cross his legs. They all sat down like this, and Yunho had to do everything exactly as his father said after he closed his eyes. His father told him not to answer now, but the guy said okay, for which he received a slap on the forehead. First he needs to open the blocked channels and take a deep breath. At this time, an unknown man in a headdress was riding through the city on a donkey. He had a long gray beard and a concentrated face. He was purposefully driving somewhere. After they started training, something went wrong and Yunho started bleeding from the mouth. His father held him in his arms and begged him not to lose consciousness, periodically calling him by name. The father shouted at the Vice Lord. He was on nerves and wanted to know when the doctor would arrive, but he asked him to calm down, because he would arrive soon. Yunho's body suddenly became hot, and he lost consciousness after vomiting blood. They did not understand what could go wrong, because everything was right. At that time the doctor examined him. After that, he said that he was fine, or rather, in excellent condition, which did not fit into my father's head. Therefore, he asked to repeat what he had just said. He did not believe his ears, because he saw with his own eyes how the guy felt bad. The doctor has already seen similar cases. It is simply a negative reaction when too much energy accumulates in the body. His father thought this was crazy because Yunho had never studied any energy harvesting techniques. Yes, and he could not study them without dantian, but it turned out that natural energy can be obtained without it. But the problem is that then the energy accumulates in the meridians, not in the dantian, and yet the amount of energy is too great. The doctor saw that the blocked meridians had successfully opened, even those near the heart. The Lord and his deputy were amazed by this fact, because there are so many heart meridians, but since they did not believe in it, the doctor allowed them to check it themselves. The opening of the heart meridians means that it has reached its peak, and the energy inside the body is too great. The Lord touched his chest and was simply shocked by what he felt. They were all open. Even the chi of his father's entire life was only equal to 1 year. He did not understand how this was even possible. If he was bedridden for a year and never learned the energy harvesting technique. That gray-haired man on a donkey came here to look at the young master who had escaped from the clutches of death. Looking at the guy, he noted that the Lord's son had grown significantly over the years. After some time, Yunho slowly opened his eyes, after which he abruptly stood up and began to inspect the area. Somehow he ended up on the mountain, not knowing where he was or how he got there. He only remembered how he created the Dientan, but how he got here is not clear. Suddenly his thoughts were disturbed. An old man asked the guy if he wanted to study martial arts. The guy turned sharply at him and stared intently. The old man was embarrassed by this, and he asked if he would continue to stare at him like that. According to etiquette, you need to greet your master with a bow, but the guy didn't even know that it was his master. The guy didn't understand why the frail old man was saying that he would teach him martial arts. Yunho turned away from the old man, because who was he to call himself the guy's master? He asked where they were. It turned out that this grandfather had been asked to demonstrate everything to him. The guy thought the old man was crazy because he had no idea what his father told him to do. But Yunho wanted to choose his own master, so he began to threaten the old man to leave him behind if he didn't want to get hurt. But the grandfather, without even straining, pushed the guy in the chest so that he flew off. Yunho flew several meters and lost consciousness, which he definitely did not expect from the old man. After staying in this state for a while, he sharply opened his eyes and jumped up, looking at the man in surprise. The old man sat down next to him and let him know that his body was weaker than he thought. The guy was hurt by this, and he began to get angry, saying that it was time to stop chattering. The master also noted that the boy had not even begun to grow a beard on his face. The guy got mad again and attacked him with his fists. He was not happy that he was talking to him. But grandfather again, without even straining, simply stopped his blow with his palm, with a grin. After which, still without getting up, he simply hit the boy, and he flew off, turning over. Yunho lay on his back, with a black eye, looking at the sky, wondering how many more times he would see it today. The boy got up after quarreling, but the master wanted to end it, and even got up. The master offered one solution: he would get behind Yunho if he could grab the old man's hem. But if he cannot, he will have to accept him as his master, and obediently become his student. The guy was still very angry. He saw no point in agreeing to this bet, and continued to shout at him. The old man continued to provoke him, saying that he was not sure that he could even grab him by the hem. Yunho still decided to run at him, because even without a master he could become the king of the Yukai world. It would seem that the guy was already close to his goal, but the old man simply jumped high into the air. The grandfather escaped from the boy's hands, leaving behind him a trail of grass that he tore off with his jump. He looked like a hulking palm tree under a gust of meters, but on the other hand, he resembled a rabbit. The guy decided that it would be better to catch him by the skin rather than by the fabric, and jumped in his direction. Yunho's grandfather again, with ease, thanks to one feint, dodged him, and the guy's plan failed. Maybe the old man's skin is dry and rough due to age, but it certainly doesn't look like stone. The guy decided to act differently. He found some kind of stone and couldn't think of anything better than to throw the stone at him. But he turned out to be wrong. The old man did the same, easily dodged, but was surprised by the guy's resourcefulness. Yunho did not lose hope and continued to attack him, but he, without even bothering, calmly dodged. The guy got angry, concentrated his chi energy and accelerated, which surprised the old man. Finally, after so much time, he was able to hit him in the chest and even moved him a little. The master clenched his teeth, and Yunho had a demon look, after which he simply laughed. He smiled, saying that for a brat he had good inclinations in this direction. The guy opened his eyes wide and looked at the old man, not understanding what he was talking about. After which the old man hit him hard in the face and flew away again, calling him a damn old man. He heard that the men checked whether he had talent for martial arts before meeting him. It would be sad if they accidentally injured him. The old man believed that he would not grow up if he did not see the sky. Although the young master had an innate talent for martial arts, the old man could already compare him to his brother. Even his younger brother, nicknamed the martial arts genius, was not as talented at that age as Yunho. Master's younger brother, current head of the Namgung family, and leader of the Mirim alliance. His name is rightfully included in the list of the 24 strongest, and he is called the strongest in Mirim. It was about the Sword King Namgung Jin, which surprised Yunho's father, but the old man could not say out loud what he meant. It could be called the old man's useless greed, but he really wanted to turn Yunho into a strong master and introduce him to the world. The Lord had no reason to refuse him if the master personally wanted to train the guy. However, he was sad to say, but the young master managed to grab his hem. At this time, the boy was sitting on the bed and just looking at one point, with his black eye. It was already midnight, so my father asked me to think about it again, while the master was resting in the annex. But a man's word is gold, although they didn't know each other much, so the father asked his grandfather for a favor. Suddenly the men saw in front of them a beaten Yunho in pajamas, who was clearly dissatisfied with something. The guy was wondering what the reason was that his attacks didn't work on the old man. Thanks to this, he himself wanted to learn from this master, and asked to teach him everything he knew. Yunho sat on his knees, closed his eyes and lowered his head, waiting for agreement from the old man. But he was disappointed, because the master said that now he had no desire to teach the guy. One day Yunho was talking to the vice lord about Namgung Yongnam, about a great martial artist. He doesn't have such a big reputation because he left the Namgung family for sightseeing, which is his hobby. However, his insight is better than others and he is still an unrivaled martial artist. He ranked among the 24 strongest along with his younger brother Namgung Jin, leader of the Mirim alliance. Thus, it turns out that he is a good teacher, and the deputy considers it an honor to be his student. But the guy was the one who confidently appeared before the Tathagata without any courtesy, so it is an honor for the old man to be his disciple. That's why Yunho didn't like bowing to him. He would be laughed at if the Yukai world found out about it. But he's hardly in a situation where he needs to worry about that. He just wanted to get stronger. 2 years have passed since that moment. It was winter outside. Everything around was covered with snow. Loud sounds were heard in the distance, and snow began to fall from the trees near this place. The master and Yunho were practicing swords, quickly jumping from tree to tree. During this time, the guy became much stronger. The master was already making considerable efforts to resist his attacks. They fought non-stop, sometimes moving in the air, with the help of trees, sometimes on the run. The master began to gain his chi energy, and the boy was not at a loss and repeated after him. They hit each other in the chest, and for a couple of seconds there was silence around. No blows of swords could be heard. After such an attack, they dispersed in different directions, creating an air explosion and raising snow into the air. They both exhaled. Their battle was almost equal. Then, after catching their breath, the conversation began. The master asked the mad brat to be more restrained if he did not want to kill his master. But the guy, taking the sword in both hands and placing them behind his head, answered with a dissatisfied face that the old man was the first to take that stance. But this idiot misunderstood. It was not an attack, but just self-defense, after which he showed his swollen hand. Even the master was now finding it difficult to fight with Yunho. But the guy believed that his old age was to blame for this. The old man believed that he had a bad habit of constantly talking nonsense. Suddenly the old man said that the time had come, but the guy did not yet know what he was talking about. The master threw him some oblong object wrapped in red cloth and ordered him to shut up. Yunho unwound this rag and saw a beautiful sword in a black case, which he was surprised at. This sword is special. It has been falling at the feet of the master for a long time, without recognizing the owner. At first the guy was upset that he let him hold the sword so that he could take it away later, but all he had to do was draw the blade. The guy did so. He took the sword out of the case and looked at it carefully, raising it in front of him. He began to get used to the new weapon. To begin with, he drew several eighths in the air. Having gotten used to its weight and size, he began to actively train with it, learning different attacks. The master quietly watched as the guy gained experience and mastered this weapon. When it reaches its peak, one can surpass normal sword prowess by coating the sword with chi. It was the so-called sword aura that Yunho conquered without much difficulty. The master was able to understand her only when his hair had already turned gray. But with this guy it turned out differently. Only 2 years have passed since he took this sword in his hands, and he succumbed to it. He studied it well enough. It could even cut large cobblestones. After such an incident, the guy noted that this sword was quite good and he was lucky with it. One day, the master turned to Yunho, saying that he had an idea of his maximum strength, which, of course, interested the guy, which is why a logical question arose in his head about the amount of his strength. The guy practiced the world's best sword techniques of the Namgung family, and completely mastered them. Even with his family's strongest technique, the imperial sword skill, he should now have enough strength to defeat the elders of the great Mirima factions. It's strange that the guy, without much joy, simply confirmed the words of his master. That's right, he was a genius that the old man had never met in his entire life. But the guy interrupted him. He didn't want to become stronger this way, but the master still didn't understand what he was talking about. The guy meant that he didn't want the influence of technology to hold him back. But the old man again didn't understand him. Undoubtedly, Namgung's sword skill is the best in the world, which is why he became so strong. However, although the guy believed that it was the best, he soon realized that these techniques were holding back his true strength. The old man still didn't fully understand what the guy wanted to convey to him, so he kept asking again. But Yunho was tired of explaining to him, so he simply turned away in search of the desired object. After some searching, he spotted a tree that was perfect for an example. He unsheathed his blade, filled himself and the weapon with chi energy, and performed an attack towards the tree. He didn't even touch it, but shot it as if from a magic wand, making a hole in it. The old man was already on his guard, but that was not all the guy was capable of. After that, he created a whirlwind of chi and broke this tree into pieces. A strong wind emanated from it. The master did not expect to see this at all, and then he realized what the guy was talking about. The guy had a devilish, purposeful look. He even wrinkled his nose. Yunho then struck the remains of the tree with his sword and a very strong and bright explosion occurred. After which he put away his sword and looked in that direction with a serious expression on his face. After the last attack, only a large ravine remained. With the help of his strength, he demolished a tree with roots and a large piece of earth. The old man considered this to be an excellent sword aura, something that could not be expressed in words. It's like a synergy between the concept of limitlessness and the very essence of martial arts. The master asked when the guy managed to learn this, but the answer amazed him. It turned out that Uhong had just started. Before that he did everything according to techniques and did not try to release all his power. Although the old man knew that the boy had surpassed him, he did not think that the difference was so great. The guy, with a grin, quipped that now the master knows why he was called an impudent one. Since he started just now, it means he has not completed this technique yet, which the guy confirmed. And the master wanted to see Yunho's full strength and see how far he could go. At first the old man asked to be allowed to help the guy, and then he decided that he would help without approval. Perhaps his extensive knowledge, accumulated so far, he has traveled around the world and seen different martial arts, will be useful to him. But the guy couldn't help but be sarcastic, saying that it would become awkward if the old man wasn't of any use. Martial arts were started by a follower of the Dharma, and important people also participated in its development. Buddhist master Sambong and the first heavenly demon. The guy knew who he was talking about. He remembered that Sambong came to him in the Yukai world along with an idiotic monk and used the yin and yang technique. Suddenly, the girl he liked when he was a Yukai surfaced in his memories. He had already forgotten about her, but he wondered if she was happy with her brother in the underworld. If Yunho had been born in that era, he would have fought them to become the strongest. The guy just laughed, which raised questions from the old man. Because of this they even stopped for a while. The master again considered him impudent, because it looked as if becoming the strongest in history was a joke for him. First, the guy picked up a sword to become stronger, and he began to draw his weapon. But now his goal is to become like a sword himself, the guy thought, placing the sword in front of him. Another training session was scheduled. Yunho prepared for the fight and gained his chi energy. They stood at a distance from each other. The master also took a weapon and stood in a fighting stance. The master warned that if the guy did not block his blow, he would die or be injured. If this happens, he will be branded as a teacher who killed his student. The old man asked him about his readiness so as not to attack unexpectedly, and he had the opportunity to repel the attack. Yunho did not answer, but with all his appearance he showed that he could already begin. The master gathered his chi energy, took a step back and began to accelerate to attack. He had a sword in his hands, also covered with chi, and he ran towards his opponent with great speed. He was about to show the student the experience of his entire life, but for now he was calmly waiting for the attack. Everything he had learned in his entire life, he was going to put into just one blow. The guy concentrated on the teacher's attack and knitted his eyebrows, waiting for his approach. Once the old man was at the required distance, the student was able to parry his blow. He chopped his sword like cabbage. The old man's eyes widened in shock. At this time, there was a very bright explosion of chi energy from Yunho, lighting up everything around. This happened in a few seconds. The master did not even stop, but flew over the guy. By the time the master landed, this explosion had almost disappeared, and fragments of the sword scattered in different directions. It looked like the guy didn't put in much effort as he calmly put away his sword. Yunho exhaled, his mouth still emitting a bright light of chi energy and steam. Suddenly the old man, trembling, laughed hysterically. He certainly did not expect such an outcome of the battle. His unity of sword and chi, the aura of the sword and the weapon itself were all broken and disrupted. The greatest enlightenment he had attained throughout his life turned out to be useless. The old man's sword turned out to be somehow arrogant. He wondered how many blows the student managed to deliver. It turned out to be 1,000. It looks like he just started and almost immediately mastered this heavy equipment. Yunho agreed with this. But this technique did not have a name yet, it was quite new. With the sword on the ground, while his arrogance soared to the skies, the old man came up with something suitable. He can be called a sky proper, because he makes even the heavens tremble with fear. And it would sound even better, a sword that crushes the skies. The guy even seemed to like that. He thought for a while, a sword that could crush the sky seemed pretty good. But the old man was simply sharing his thoughts. Perhaps this is too grand a name. As a result, after 5 years of training with the master, the guy reached enormous heights. He created and completed the strongest sword technique of all time called the heaven-crushing sword. In the morning, Yunho walked to his father, yawning and stretching. Yesterday's training went very well. He overslept because he spent the night watching the master's teachings to hone his skills. The guy arrived just in time. His father asked him to go to the academy, and took Somi with him. In general, this is the duty of the vice lord, but he asked for a few days off to visit his sick mother. The guy suggested just sending a servant and a few guards, after eating he was going to train. But he was the strongest and most reliable person in the entire Supreme Coalition. So, since his father told him to go, he would have to listen to him. So he exhaled in displeasure and agreed. If you think about it like that, due to his obsession with training, he really hasn't seen Somi for a long time. Suddenly Yunho stopped and wondered, since when he unquestioningly obeys his father and takes care of his sister, he was looking more and more like the body's real owner, Yunho, which he wasn't particularly pleased with. Convincing himself that it was him, and not that dead Yunho, the guy walked further, with a confident gait. They say that only rich people can afford to study at this institution. They even send carriages for them to show off. The Vice Lord also came in a carriage to pick Somi up from the academy. The thought of it made him feel uneasy. Suddenly, one of the men, who was adjusting the reins of the horses, noticed that the guy was looking intently in that direction. He pointedly tried to ask Yunho why he was staring, to which he simply grinned. The man did not like this very much, and he immediately began to threaten and decided to enlighten him about who the owner of this carriage was. The guy, not the least bit frightened, began to take out his sword, and the man, too, was not at a loss and agreed to fight right on the spot. But it turned out that Yunho was not reaching for the sword, but for his golden tablet with a cloud pattern and an engraved Tian symbol. The man fell into a stupor and broke out in a cold sweat when he learned that he was a member of one of the 4 great alliances, the Supreme Coalition. He made a dissatisfied face, showing this sign, and asked again whose carriage it was. After a short amount of time, the long-awaited Somi came out. She was very happy to see her brother. Running up to the guy, she jumped on him, hugging him by the neck, happy because he had come to pick her up. She was already 16, so he was indignant that it was time to stop throwing herself at him like that. She thought that he meant someone else's opinion, but it shouldn't bother her, because she just loves her brother. But that's not what he meant at all, which is why the girl smiled slyly, looking at her brother. It seemed to him that this girl looked like her late mother. She had become so prettier in recent years. The girl suggested stopping at the market along the way and having a snack, but the guy was still indignant that she was walking, hanging over him. That man asked his friend Seo Guk-ju if he knew the boy, to which he received a positive answer. This is the young gentleman of the Supreme Coalition. It seems clear by appearance. It's strange that the man didn't recognize him. In the evening, my father sat peacefully in his office and looked at some envelope with a seal. Suddenly, behind the wall, he heard his children talking after they had a snack. The girl ate a lot and was still hungry, but she justified herself by saying that she supposedly had a special stomach, after which they looked at their father and noted that they had arrived. But they noticed that the father was sitting upset, somewhat drooping. Apparently something had happened. After a short amount of time, he finally decided to tell them what happened. It turned out that the old master, Teacher Yunho, died 2 days ago at dawn. The guy was shocked by the news. The old man seemed to be in good shape and had no intention of dying. The whole family got together and went in a caravan to say goodbye to the old master. Yunho sat with a calm face, but at that time he himself recalled the moments of the time spent with the teacher. The guy just wanted to live the way he wanted. He said this at his last meeting with the old man, to which he replied that this is a very difficult, but good path for the strongest who want to reach the peak of martial arts. Therefore, the master wanted to see in person what path Yunho would take. He was wondering how much time he had left, to which the guy, as usual, joked that the old man didn't have much time left, for which he again called him a parasite. You should not shed too much blood. If bloodshed cannot be avoided, then you need to reduce it as much as possible. But the guy just wanted to live in accordance with his desires and nothing more. In this world, it is unknown how long everything will go the way he wants, the old man warned him. He didn't want the words blood and demon attached to the guy's name. The main thing was that he controlled himself. The 5 years they spent together were long and eventful. They both thought so. The guy remembered all this without a single emotion on his face, thinking that after death people go to the underworld. This is more like the beginning rather than the end of life. He would like to see the old man again. In the morning they approached the palace of the Nambong family. This was the master's family. At this time many people entered the courtyard. As they approached the gate, all the people passing by focused their attention on them. Everyone recognized the guard of the Supreme Coalition, sitting in armor on a horse. All the guards were elite masters of the arts. They were stronger than the so-called first-class masters. Grand Guardian Ko Wui introduced himself and provided information about the arrival of Master Hajin Yu, and the children. The busiest man in the Central Valley has come such a long way. For Chief Namgung to meet Ha-Jin-yu, he is a famous and influential person. The guy thought that the trade union was treated the same as a family of merchants when they visited such a great family. He was surprised that the head himself came out to meet his father in person. He reminded him of that teacher. Like him who caused trouble at the academy, this one also seems to be afraid of his father's financial power. They arrived at the palace to honor the memory of the great master who taught Yunho. The courtiers were surprised by this, and the uncle of the head, in any case, wanted Ha-Jin-yu to come. He introduced his children, his son Yunho, who, as usual, stood with a dissatisfied face, and his friendly daughter Somi. It was an honor for the girl to meet the head of such a great family. She stood with a blissful smile. It turns out that the uncle often mentioned the young lady Somi in his conversations. He also advised to accept her as a great niece, because she is smart, and beautiful. After which, he turned his dissatisfied gaze to the equally dissatisfied Yunho. He clarified whether it was true that his uncle taught him martial arts, to which the guy simply remained silent. But it seems a little like he still decided to answer, saying that he had studied several techniques of the Namgung family. The subjects were shocked by the master's carelessness. He taught family martial arts to a stranger, but the head shut them up with one hand gesture. There was no point in making a scene in front of his dear guest. Immediately the head and Yunho collided with contemptuous glances. They were both dissatisfied with something. The head apologized and asked to understand that they do not know etiquette well and speak without understanding the situation. But Ha-Jin-yu did not hold a grudge, because he only asked the master to train his son so that he could defend himself. Therefore, he hoped that they would forgive him for his selfish request. He even bowed. Be that as it may, they had come a long way, so the head personally wanted to show everything here. At this time, outside the city in the forest, someone resembling a primitive man sniffed. He did this towards the city. He sniffed around from all sides, holding a red stick with a blue rope in his hand. It turns out that he smelled the scent of some kind of monster that had arrived in the city. It seems that he had already encountered something similar. Photo of the master on the wall, and under it stood a memorial candle in a candlestick. Yunho, still gloomy, with frowning eyebrows, stood in the aisle and looked at the altar from afar. The courtyard was very crowded. Many came to honor the memory of this old man. In addition to people from the 9 great clans and 5 famous families, there are even people from unorthodox sects here. Unorthodox are those who do not follow generally accepted norms, and in Urim they are often called representatives of the evil faction. Yunho wondered how his sister knew all this, he asked, looking at her suspiciously. She saw her father meeting many of them, but he didn't know that she was peeping. The father volunteered to accompany the head, so that the children could eat here for now, to which they happily agreed. Yunho goes to get some air while Somi orders more food for 2. Some big, muscular man aggressively placed a shot glass on the table. He was fed up with such sad funerals. He was angry and very indignant.